advocate for yourself, because being a mom is not a weakness. Having boundaries to be present for your children is not a weakness. In fact, that's what makes a fulfilling and rich life, to be able to be present for those moments.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all: our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone.
And we are back for another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. And as always, I am so grateful that you are here, whether it is your 80th time listening or your first time listening. You are welcome here. And I am so thrilled to introduce my next guest today, because not only has she become a personal friend over the years, although we've never actually met in person, she is an inspiration in the world of working moms. And so this is a little bit of a different interview, because she's not an expert in temper tantrums, and she's not an expert in planning, and she's not an expert in helping your teenager become more resilient. And those are all awesome subjects, and we have or will address them all. But she is a mom who helps other moms, I think, realize what's possible just by being who she is and doing what she does. I have her bio that I could read for you, but really, I think, and you'll hear me say this during our interview, the bio that you need to hear is she's a badass attorney mom of 4 who is kicking ass and taking names and doing it with heart and mindfulness and love and positivity. And because that's the mindset that she brings to her life and to her work and to her parenting, I think we all have so much to learn from her. What originally led me to invite her to be on the podcast was an event that happened, something that happened that she did that happened back in February of this year and again in March of this year, that among lawyers, it's something involving her legal career, and among lawyers, it is highly unusual, virtually unheard of. In some circles, could be considered like a slow form of like career suicide, right? It just wouldn't be favorably or isn't favorably viewed by many folks. And she pulled it off with grace and awesomeness. And that's what led me to invite her on the podcast. And our conversation goes so much further and so much deeper than that. And in fact, as you will hear, we were so busy talking that this episode is a little bit longer than some of my others, because there just was so much good stuff. And I thought it was important to really let you hear from her. So who is she? Her name is Megan Whiteside, and she lives on the opposite coast from me. She lives and works in DC and Maryland. Like I said, she's a trial lawyer, like a badass trial lawyer. She works in personal injury, but with a specialty in supporting the families of individuals who die in nursing homes under circumstances that are not okay. She started her own law firm. She's a national speaker, and she is a mom of 4 kids, like under the age of 7. And she has some really lovely thoughts and ideas about how many of us can step out of the overwhelm a bit, because I know that's a place that many of us find ourselves. And she doesn't have some magic, like she's not paying for childcare. She's doing it. She is in there as a parent, and she is in there as a professional. And I just think she is such a positive, lovely human, and I can't wait for you to hear from her. So with that being said, without further ado, my friend, my colleague, an inspiration, Megan Whiteside. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. We have been talking about doing this for quite a while, and I love that we're finally making it happen, and that we're making it happen in a season where parents are struggling, like back to school, fall. And I didn't tell you this before we hit record. I don't know if you saw this, but the Surgeon General just came out with a report I think he wrote an article in the New York Times about how parents are struggling so much and that we're not doing an adequate job of supporting them.
Oh,
I know. Like dire warnings. I mean, it was pretty compelling. So with that kind of as our backdrop, I want to dive in and talk about, you're this, and I said it in the intro, and I'll say it again probably 4 more times, this badass mom attorney. And a lot of people, I think, would look at you and go, how in the hell does she do it? So let's talk about your professional journey a little bit.
thank you. Thank you for those kind words. First of all, that really means a lot, especially coming from you. So thank you. And I will say it doesn't always feel that way when I look at myself. And I think, as parents, as working moms, we all can be super self-critical. So I start with that because I struggle with the same self-criticism that I venture to guess all working moms have. But yes, I am a trial lawyer. I do nursing home abuse and neglect. Really, I think, important work. I represent the families of individuals who have died in nursing homes. And so I've been a plaintiff's lawyer for most of my career. I've been a litigator for my entire career. I've been a lawyer for 14 years. I am a mom of 4, which in this day and age, people think you're nuts. But I love it.
It's not super common.
Not super common.
No.
Get lots of jokes. So you got to either be Mormon or Catholic. And I say, I'm Catholic. They go, okay, well, that makes sense. No, but it's the joy of my life. Really, that's my first full-time job. And I'm lucky that I get to be a lawyer on top of that. About a year and a half ago, a little less than a year and a half ago, I opened my own law firm, which also people think you're nuts. I was 16 weeks pregnant at the time.
I will admit that I had that thought, like, oh my God, she's doing what?
Yes. But I'm sure we'll get into it, but it created freedom that was so necessary at that time. And at this time now, I am a podcast host for a podcast that's been on pause for quite some time, but I have started recording episodes again, Mom, Life, and Law, which you guest on, which I was so grateful.
It's such a good podcast, and I've been waiting for it to come back.
Yeah. Yes, and we can get into why it's been on pause because that's part of this journey too. I do legal analysis on TV from time to time. I speak nationally on issues that are really important to me, whether that's surviving and thriving as a working mom, to trial advocacy techniques, to advocating for the elderly. Those are my favorite things to talk about, sprinkled in with a little bit of mindfulness, which is sort of how I've gotten to the place that I am now. And I'm enthusiastic about supporting other moms, for how we started this conversation. I think that the messages we all receive as working moms are just so negative, right? That you need coffee to get through the day and wine to cope with it at the end of the day, and this like miserable mommy culture. And I do not subscribe to it. I think that life is too short to be miserable. And there are things that I have really worked hard to do and now practice daily to be able to navigate the hard, but still come through it with a sense of joy. So if that's sort of me in a nutshell, I guess.
I so love that, you in a nutshell, because, you and I have known each other, gosh, Megan, 4 years, I want to say. Like, I think we met during the pandemic. And y'all, for people who are listening, like Megan and I have been in contact pretty consistently over the years. We've never actually met in person.
We're always internet friends.
I know, we are. It's like through Facebook groups and then through Zoom calls and texting here and there and, supporting one another's endeavors. But we've never actually met in person. But when we did meet, and at various points throughout, like one of the things that has been so inspiring to me as a fellow working mom, actually two things I'll say. One is the level of positivity that you bring to the work that you do, both at home and, in your legal work. And also your commitment, and you mentioned this, and we can dig into it as we talk, but your commitment to that mindfulness piece. And I remember a like all day CLE that you hosted that I spoke at, and there were sprinkled throughout that day were, speakers and a focus on this topic of mindfulness. So, and maybe those, not maybe, those two things go hand in hand, right? The ability to be mindful and the positivity, which has just been amazing. So I want to back up though a little bit and talk about what really prompted this conversation today. Because you just described, you've got 4 kids, you started this law firm. I saw, I think it was on Facebook that I saw this and reached out to you because you made a pretty bold decision in February and then again in March of this year. And I want you to tell the story.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And is one of those things that, have you ever had those moments where you're like, I really want to do something professionally, but how the hell am I going to make it work with life at home? I've got so much going on. So the short version is I took a baby to 2 lawyer conferences, one in February and one in March. My son was 3 months old and 4 months old, my youngest son, 3 months old and 4 months old at those events, respectively. And
you guys, people don't do that. People don't do that.
Well, and for those listeners that aren't lawyers, being a mom is seen as a weakness in the legal community. There's still such a stigma attached to it. We've made massive advancements even in the years that I've been practicing, but there are so many women who are afraid to even talk about their commitments as mom in fear of being seen as not committed to their jobs, not able to carry out their responsibilities, being looked over for advancement and promotions because they're too focused on home. I mean, it's a real problem. And there's, in many ways, we see implicit bias in the workforce. There is a layer of that's associated with active parenthood. I think that it applies to men who really want to be involved in their kids' lives and miss, 7 a.m. meetings to be there for the first day of school, say.
Right.
So my baby was, when I made the decision, 2 months old, and this child, my 4th child, is so cute, but man, he's giving me a run for my money. He would not take a bottle. So I'm still nursing, and I'm looking ahead at this conference that happens every year that is really important to me, really impactful for my practice. It's an opportunity to see colleagues from all across the country. It's important. And, it was one of those things. I had launched my firm. There were a lot of reasons it was going to be important for me to be there. And I was looking at the registration and looking ahead at the dates going, okay, can I get this baby to take a bottle in the next few weeks? Should I pay the exorbitant registration fee and buy flights and hotels knowing I might have to cancel? How would those logistics work? Could I, so I'm going through all of the reasons of why, it's a struggle to be able to make it happen. And I'm forever grateful. I have a really close girlfriend who does the same work that I do, who actually doesn't have children. And she goes, well, why don't you bring the baby? I could think I was going through, I don't know if it's going to work. I'm humming and hawing. I really want to go. I don't think I can make this happen. And oh my gosh, he's so little. And how can I leave my husband with 4 kids? That's a lot. I haven't even handled 4 kids. I was going to be gone for 5 days. I'm like, I haven't even handled 4 kids alone for 5 days. I'm sure he could do it, but that doesn't seem fair. So anyway, when you have a good friend, they can reflect back to you sometimes things that you can't see. And she goes, well, why don't you take him? And she joked, and I love it. She goes, and I bet you, Megan, this is going to be the best marketing and PR you couldn't even pay for. And I kind of laughed, but I had this light bulb moment. And I said to myself, why not? I am in this season of why not, kind of going back to launching the firm of, trying things that I've never done and doing things in a different way than I've done before. And so I booked the registration, I booked the flight, I booked the hotel, and I put the information in for a lap infant. And I just thought, okay, I'll revisit it. We've got, 3 or 4 weeks, we'll figure it out. And as I was getting closer, I was talking to my husband, and he was also encouraging me. He goes, sure. I mean, he's like a lump at this point. He'll nap anywhere. He's easy. He doesn't, he's swaddled at night. He'll probably sleep just fine. So this is a national conference for plaintiffs, trial lawyers, and some of the most successful lawyers on the plaintiff side come to this event. It's like premier, like CLE education and meetings and social events and all the things. And here I was with the baby in a stroller or just holding the little guy, walking around to all these lawyer events. And I got to go to, when he napped in the stroller, I would sit in the CLE and get the information that I really needed. And if he woke up, I would leave. Right. I would sit in on these meetings on committees that I have, do volunteer work for, that we can do a lot remotely, but some things have to be in person. And I sat in on meetings. And when he woke up or got a little fussy, I walked out. And I didn't go to the late night parties because his bedtime was 7:00, but I could go to dinner with people that I've known for years and, politely excuse myself to bring him back for a bath and put him down to bed. And so it wasn't the typical conference experience, but it was so cool because our mutual friend Sarah Williams has a saying. She goes, the people that are for you are for you, right? And I had this overwhelming response, positive response to bringing a 3-month-old baby to a law conference. I can't tell you how many men and women came up to me. They wanted to meet him. They wanted to talk to me. They wanted to meet me, or the people that knew me had seen me at the last conference pregnant, right? And wanted to express how awesome it was that I took the bold step to bring a baby to a conference. And you know what? I got a lot of side eye too. And I got, some of the old guard who kind of were looking at me like I was crazy. Those people are not for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But my referral partners, my colleagues, my friends, the people I want to learn from and work with in this community, in my field, there were so many who received it positively. And so many young women came up to me who were either pregnant or new moms, having a little one in the infant year, who it was like I gave them permission, just being there with the baby, to talk about that side, to say, I really miss my baby. It was really hard to decide to come. Next time I'm going to bring my family. Like, this one young mom had a little daughter the same age as my son who was there, and her husband had come with the baby to the conference because she had the same problem as me. I can't leave. And this was her first baby. So, remember back when you have your first baby?
Yes.
We're nuts. All of us, we're nuts about everything. So she's like, I can't leave my baby for 5 days. So she had her husband come to the conference, and she would go back and see them and then go to meetings. She brought her baby to the next afternoon social gathering. And I got to meet her daughter, and she said, I wouldn't have brought her out, but I saw you had your son, and you gave me the confidence to do it.
Oh my God, that is giving me chills, that story. Yeah. Because, as a lawyer, and, and I have been I'm not actively practicing now, but I've been a licensed attorney for 24 years. Yeah. And I felt my own career as a lawyer impacted by my parenthood in a negative way, right? That was not viewed favorably, right? When I finally said that I was pregnant, the look on the face of my supervisor was like, well, you're done. It was really, really profound. And so to hear that a fellow mom, somebody I've respected for years, who, made this decision because yes, it worked for your family, but without maybe realizing how brave and sort of transformational and then you gave this other mom permission to own her momhood, right? And her role as a parent, and to show up with her baby, again, and for those who are listening who are not lawyers, which I know is most of my listeners, this is a really big deal. And when I saw it on Facebook, I think I texted you and I was like, this is amazing, right? Like this is a really big deal. And then the fact that you shared it on social media and talked about it and that we're talking about it now, I think gives more moms more permission in other fields, in tech, in STEM, in whatever, to say, I am not just one damn thing.
That's right.
Right?
That's
I'm
right.
more than one thing. And I can do more than one thing well.
And I think it makes us better, right? You have to have balance, not that everything is an equilibrium, but you have to have, I have my professional time and identity, but if that's all you do, you burn out. And for me personally, I don't have the gift to be a stay-at-home mom. That's not my gift. And so for me, when you have, a few weeks of zero camp, I think I had 3 weeks of zero camp at the end of the summer, like trying to like get babysitters or, have mom days or hot potato with my husband, like that, I would have burnt out if I was doing all mom all the time. And so having multiple identities is a strength, not a weakness, but in really demanding professions that are still male dominated. Let's face it, the legal field is still male dominated, as are many of the STEM fields. And I'm sure we could go down the list. So in fields that are male dominated, I think as women, we are tempted to try to conform to that ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point in my career where I decided that's not going to work for me. And it's scary as hell, but ultimately really freeing, because the people that are for me are for me. Right? My business is based primarily on attorney referrals. So I am a small shop. I'm not going to be a mega advertiser. I'm not looking for a huge volume of practice. I have a very small caseload where I go an inch wide and a mile deep, right? And work really hard to get success and justice for these families. So my business model is usually other lawyers will get nursing home abuse and neglect cases, not know what to do with them. And either they co-counsel with me and I teach them how to do it and work the case, or they refer the case to me. And so my ideal referral partner is also a parent, likely a mom. My ideal clients are moms in the sandwich generation who have had parents who have passed away tragically, who are also juggling, usually, teens or young adults at that point. Uh-huh. All of those people are going to be just fine with me being a mom. In fact, they'll probably relate to me better and trust me more.
Yeah.
So this sort of journey, and it's been I kind of got on this journey right before I met you, end of 2019. And it's gotten to a point of being unapologetically myself. And once you do it, it's like a muscle memory. Like, it's scary at first, it's unfamiliar, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So the funny thing about taking the baby to the conference, so the bigger conference was in February. That was the national one with mostly men and all of it. That was on paper a bigger deal. But once I made the decision to do it, it wasn't scary. Like, it wasn't scary at all to show up to registration when you go and get your conference badge. Like, I'm sure everybody who goes to conferences, you get the little lanyard, you got your conference badge, so you have to go up to registration. I walked up pushing a stroller. And then the first day of meetings, I walked up, with the little guy in a stroller. There were events with the, association president for that association where, I was going to get to see him, and, it was a big deal. And he came up to me and he's like, oh my gosh, I gotta bring my wife over. Could she hold your baby? But I didn't have an oh shit moment. I'm talking to this person who's impactful and important in my community. What's he going to think I'm holding a baby? I was just like, how's it going? Yes, here's the little guy. Let me, sure, your wife can hold him. And so I think there's if we kind of take a few steps back, there's a lot to it that maybe if you're looking at me like, oh, sure, okay, she's got her own business, she's got a bunch of kids, she can do that, but that's not something I could ever do. Maybe you don't do it in the same way, but there are the steps that went into getting here. I think everybody can try.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that a little bit because it, as you said just a second ago, like you started this journey back in 2019. This wasn't an overnight,
No.
oh, look at me, I can do whatever the hell I want in the legal field, and I'm going to show up with my baby and take it or leave it, right? Like you weren't at that necessarily at that point, like the people that are for me are for me, right? And similar to you, the journey that I've been on where I was like, I actually want to leave my legal career, which was, I mean, I had people say to me, "You're doing what? Like,
I'm
what?
sure.
What? You can't not do this, right?" But finally coming to this is what I need for me. But that's never an overnight process. So I know it's been a roller coaster. So can we talk about that a little bit and how you broke through those, the down slopes. And what are those steps that other parents who are listening to this, moms and dads, can take to say, I am not just a blank, I am also a parent?
Yeah. I think that the first and most important thing for everybody to realize is that your brain lies to you. And that when you say, I could never do that in engineering, I could never do that in medicine, I could never do that in as a university professor, whatever your profession is, that's an optional thought. And our brain, it's self-preservation, it's evolution, right? We are programmed as human beings to have the negative thought first because that's what kept us safe from the wild animals before we lived in structures, right? Like it's just we are programmed to believe I need to stay safe, I need to not take risks, I need to, and so those negative thoughts keep us in the comfort zone, keep us in safety. But really, for me, I realized the comfort zone and the safety of those thoughts was miserable and not fulfilling and not really true to who I am. And so back in December of 2019, at the time my baby, my second son, I had a 3-year-old and a soon to be 1-year-old. And so my second baby was almost 1. And that the first year of any child's life is exhausting. And
Yes, it is.
and I can say 4 for 4 times, like it doesn't get easier, you just get stronger, right? And so my oldest is a newly minted 3-year-old, which is also a challenging time, and the baby's turning 1. And you looked at me on paper, and I had it all. I had amazing, handsome, supportive husband, the 2 kids, the house, the cars, I'm trying cases. I'm, coming up in the litigation world in my field. I'm getting speaking opportunities. I started a couple years before that teaching at my law school as an adjunct professor. It was like, check all the boxes, check, 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 check. Everybody's healthy, everybody's happy, everybody, on paper.
Uh-huh.
And I go back and I look at photographs of myself from this period of time, and I look older than I do now. And you can just see the misery behind my eyes. Like I just look like hollow and sad. And I couldn't figure out why I was so miserable. I had what I wanted. I had the career, I had the marriage, I had the children, I had the house, I had this, I had that. Like I had achieved all of the things I had set out to achieve.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't happy. And that's a really hard thing to reconcile.
Yeah, because you've worked so hard for all those things.
And I felt like, who am I to like complain? Who am I to like say I'm miserable? Like how much more could one person want or have or get? But I think that to make a change, you can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results.
Yeah.
And we got through the baby's first birthday party, which again, like you look back at the pictures, it was like, oh, I did this whole big Hot Wheels birthday. Everybody was happy. We had little coordinating outfits, like, oh, all good. And I remember like that night, I felt empty. Like I should be so happy. We just had this happy day. And 3 months later, the world shut down.
Uh-huh. It sure did.
And that was not a good time for isolation, for any of us, but especially for my mental health at that time. And so I spent the first few months of the pandemic searching for something, right? Like we all had, more time at home. So I was going to, I was reading books. I was going to like the webinars that were popping up everywhere. I was, making internet friends through mom Facebook groups. So I was just like grasping for something. I stumbled upon a couple of women who were putting on webinars and things and found myself in a life coaching group coaching program. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, if I ever would have done life coaching, I would have said, that is so weird. I don't even know what you're talking about. That's too woo-woo for me,
Right.
But when you're desperate, like I was like, okay, I got to do something. Like this woman seems amazing. I'm going to try her program. And there were just 4 of us to start who were participants in her program. And I learned for the first time what it is to name your core values. And I learned for the first time what thought work is. Like when I talked about like those optional thoughts, right? That every circumstance is neutral. You have a thought about it, which leads to a feeling, which leads you to act in a certain way, which gets you a result. An example is a toddler tantrum, right? Like, okay, my 3-year-old is melting down because I gave him the wrong colored spoon or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's not an example from real life at all.
No, nobody can relate to that example.
Or I took the spoon out of the drawer instead of him, right? And I could have a thought of, I don't have time for this. We're just trying to get food in these kids so we can get out the door, or whatever. Like you can think of like, not again. All of those are optional thoughts, right? Which leads to a feeling of frustration. It leads to, right, just like closing off, not being like open to solutions. And so, why is this happening again? I don't have time for this, leads to frustration or anger, which leads me to maybe snap at my toddler or raise my voice or snatch the spoon away and just say, fine, you don't get a spoon, which leads to a worse tantrum. That result is worse, which
Right.
leads to a longer delay, which leads to, that's not a result I want.
And not to mention then the self-talk that goes on for you.
Oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mom. I yell at my kids. Yeah. The spiral is real. And so what I learned in life coaching was you can just change your thoughts to dramatically, you change nothing about the circumstance. You change your thought about it and it dramatically changes your outcome. And so this applies in work and in parenting. It applies to when I'm in the middle of trial and something goes awry, or when I am, whatever it is, oh my gosh, at a PTO meeting and the mean moms are conspiring against me, whatever it is, like it happens. And so what I learned is that you could say, that I gave the wrong color, meltdown, wrong colored spoon. I could recognize that when I'm having negative thoughts, I have a physical reaction. I get a tightness in my chest. I can pause and take a deep breath and try to regulate my nervous system a little bit and think, this is a 3-year-old having a 3-year-old moment, which is a neutral thought. Not that I'm saying it's good. Not that I'm saying everything's going to be okay. Because some people think like toxic positivity. Oh, like you just have positive thoughts. No. Sometimes I just try to have a neutral thought.
Yeah.
This is a 3-year-old having a 3-year-old moment. And that gives me a feeling of calm, control, really, because like I can control me. I can't control a 3-year-old having a 3-year-old moment. Like the calm that comes and those feelings will lead to my actions of probably just pausing a minute and not saying anything, because there's nothing you can say with the toddler melting down over the green spoon over the orange spoon, which sometimes they pick up on your breathing instead of their own after a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I could say, well, I could give you an orange spoon also. Would you like to have 2 spoons? And it sort of shocks them and they go, yes. And then you're off to the races. Right. And so I realized it was amazing to start practicing thought work, which is really the mindfulness that I subscribe to, right? I don't go to like silent meditation retreats and do all of it, like I'm just sitting in the moment, being mindful of your thoughts, trying a different thought and seeing if you can get a different result. And let me tell you, Christy, this practice has been life-changing. And that is not hyperbole, because it's helped my marriage. It's helped my career. It's helped me in parenting. And it's not perfect. Like you go back into those old patterns, but you can pause and say, "Oop, okay, I want my thoughts get away from me there. I yelled. I don't like that. Let me try a different thought," and like reframe, to the point where now I really don't care what anybody else thinks of me. So perhaps the older men who looked at me like I had three heads when I went with the little baby to a prominent law conference.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Those are their opinions. It's none of my business.
I just want to sort of underscore the power of what you're talking about. And I know it's been a journey, and it's not something that we probably ever do perfectly every day, right? But to go from a place of, I mean, many of us as women, right? We're just, and that's not to discount men's experience, but many of us as women, will do anything to sort of make it work and put on the happy face and make it seem like everything's okay for everybody else, right? I've got it. I can handle it. I don't need anything. I'm fine. To go, and I will make you like me, right? Because that's my job as a woman in the world, to go from that to, listen, I'm getting what I need out of my life, and I'm going to show up with my baby to this conference full of, as you said, I mean, there's a lot of old white men
mm-hmm.
that are running the legal profession. And the crazy thing about that, side note, we have more women enrolling and graduating from law school than we do men. But because of things like this, where the profession is so hostile, frankly, to parenthood, so many women are leaving. And the legal profession's not alone in that. Yeah. And so you went through this journey of saying, I'm going to make a change here. And I'm going to show up at this conference, and I'm going to own my awesome lawyerness, and I'm going to own my awesome parentness. I'm making up words, but
I love it. Well, and what's cool is that the thought work exercise, or the doing like unconventional, brave things, the more you do it, the braver you get. And the more you do it, the better you get at making decisions that are right for you, as opposed to what anybody else cares or thinks. The next month went and actually spoke at, it was a smaller conference, and this one was cool because it was a women's conference. And so it was I knew it was going to be a much more hospitable place to bring baby James. But because I had just done it and had a ball, like I enjoyed doing it. And I'm going to tell him someday about our experience in Austin, Texas, going to all the things, and, being on planes. Cause you can imagine like a flight, I'm flying out of DC, flight from DC to Austin for this event. Like half the flight was lawyers going to this conference, both there and back. Right. And so it was like, you get the looks like, I got a baby on my flight. And then it's like, oh God, this lawyer lady who's been at the conference, we got this baby everywhere. But I didn't care. And I knew it was so great that this time I flew to California with him to this women's event, and I spoke, and, it was so cool because some of the people there had known about or had been at the conference the month before. And it was just like this really cool experience of joy, where women were happy to see him, hold him, right? Like there was always somebody who wanted to have a minute. And it just was, there was such ease to it because I knew I could fly with him, and I knew I could if I could do it at the big event, I could do it at this smaller event. And so it was a no-brainer, and it was so much fun for me and for everyone, well, maybe I can't speak for everyone, but for the people who expressed the joy with me.
Yeah. For the people that are your people.
They're my people. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I have to say, I also love that felt like a supportive environment, because sometimes we as women, especially when we don't feel brave enough to do something ourselves, are really critical of and frankly unsupportive of other women. And I know that supporting other women is deeply, deeply important to you. I think that's also deeply, deeply important to me. and lifting each other up. And you did that in such a, it may not have in the moment felt brave to you because you were like past the, you're at the, I don't care what other people think. But from an outsider's perspective, who knows how, like, people don't do that, right? Like you don't take babies to a continuing legal education conference. It's groundbreaking. And I hope that parents listening, moms and dads, right, take that as permission to do something brave where they exist. Yeah. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we came on, but whether that's saying to the place that you work, not only can I not make a meeting on the first day of school because I want to be there for my kids, no one else here should have to be at a meeting either because they also have children, or, many of them do. Like, that can feel really scary, but can be so important.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to butcher the quote, but the idea fits here, where it's like when you like raise the ceiling, raise the floor with you to like help the people that are coming behind you, right? So when you push forward doing things in an unconventional way or breaking through barriers, whatever it might be in your small way, what can you do to like bring people along with you? And so if you are in a position of influence or power in any way, in any small way, and you set a boundary for yourself or you venture out to do something brave, what can you also do to lift up the people who are maybe less senior than you in your position, or the people on your team, or whatever it might, or just maybe your colleagues your same level who are all experiencing this difficulty together. And what's funny is I did not see it or predict it when I brought the baby to that February conference, because it was more a force of necessity. If I want to go, the baby's got to come too. Because, by the way, he still was not taking a bottle at 3 months. Like, he could not figure it out.
Like, I'm not doing it.
No. So I'm the food source. So if I'm leaving, he's coming. And so it felt more of like a necessity rather than some brave mission that I'm going to show the patriarchy, whatever. No, it really was not about anything but my needs and my child's needs. But with a little bit of time and distance, I can look back and say, wow, that was pretty cool. And I would have really loved to have seen a woman do that before I had children.
Yeah.
Because I was going to those events as a single person or a young married person. And I never saw any women lawyers with their kids. Yeah. I just saw them grinding and like putting in long hours and going to 2-week trials away from home and doing all of these things and not knowing how they're managing being a mom. And I remember being a young married woman thinking like, how do you do this with a kid? Like, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, and I always knew, my husband laughs, I've always said I wanted 4 kids. And so this was not a surprise to him. And lucky for me, he goes along with all of my crazy ideas. The man would have been content at 1. Now that we have 4, he goes, okay, this is amazing. And we love all of these children. So this is a good thing. But seriously, the man would have been content with 1 child. But I think it's really important for all of us in any profession, and for men and women. And maybe it's even more important for men to show the younger people in the workforce that, oh, I'm a parent too. Yeah. And like, I am not available in certain hours in the evening. Like for me right now, and it's the luxury and the freedom of being my own boss, but really from like 4 to 8 p.m. or 4:30 to 8:30, depending on the day, I'm not available. I'm not answering phone calls. I'm not answering emails, with rare exceptions, right? But like, that's family time. Yeah. And homework time and dinner time without technology. I want to give my littles a bath and read them stories, because now seeing my 7-year-old, it's like he just wants to shower and he doesn't want that or necessarily need that same attention or, making sure he doesn't drown in the bath, right? I want to be present And it would have been so powerful to have seen an example of that before I had children. I think we have some real power to make an impact and make a difference in workplaces, to set boundaries and set examples of, I'm leaving at 5 to go and do daycare pickup. I mean, how cool would, like, if my male bosses, when I was a baby lawyer, were like, nope, I'm leaving at 5:30 to go to my kid's sports game, or
Yeah.
what, and vocalizing it and being visual with it.
I think that is such an important point that you make, because I think there are many people in the workforce that they go to the game at 5:30, but they like sneak out the door, right? Like they're doing something criminal, right?
Yes.
Or
Well,
they,
I've done it. I'm sure you did it, where it was
Yep.
like, if I am late to daycare, they charge me by the minute. Like, I gotta go, but not making a
Yes.
big show of it, going out the front door, going out the side door, like the pre-COVID days when we were all in the office all the time.
totally. And I actually remember, probably shouldn't acknowledge this, but I actually remember having to be very secretive or sort of vague about what I was going to do when I was speaking with judges, for example, and saying, I'm not available for trial that day, or I'm not available for a court hearing that day because my kid's first day of preschool, or, whatever it was that I wanted to be there for, that I knew. And this is, I hope this changes and is changing. This, this was 15 years ago, or, 12 years ago, whatever. I knew that if I said, I can't be there because I need to be there for my daughter to go to the first day of preschool, or
They would have scheduled the trial.
they would have scheduled the trial.
Real quick story on that. It's so true. That is 100% correct. When I was pregnant with my second, I had a trial. I don't know, I was like 34, 35 weeks pregnant, like towards the end.
Yeah.
And massively pregnant, but showed up. I was there with my client, my witness. It was a small trial, so it would have been a bench trial that same day. And in the civil world, those small trials are rare, but sometimes you have them. And whatever reason, the docket had multiple trials scheduled at the same time. There was a snafu in scheduling, and our case very clearly was going to get bumped. No problem. Myself, my opposing counsel, our clients, we get our calendars, our cell phones. And so the judge offered dates while I was going to have a newborn. I think it was like she was proposing dates when I would have like a 3-week-old baby. And at least this was my second child, so I had the presence of mind to know, no, I'm
not happening.
I'm not gonna be able to get dressed. I'm still gonna be recovering from birth. I'm gonna be like, no, I'm not going to be trying this case, even if I wanted to. It wouldn't be physically possible. And so I said, in open court, full gallery, opposing counsel, my client, everybody, no, Your Honor, I will be on maternity leave. I'm available up until, and I gave my due date. I said, knowing that if I go into labor early, like this might have to get pushed, but I will make myself available until my due date. And then after this date, after my maternity leave, in open court, and it was a packed courtroom, a woman judge
Set the trial.
berated me that I was trying to skirt my responsibilities as a lawyer to the detriment of my client, that I wasn't taking responsibility. I mean, berated me. Like, I'm massively pregnant. I had the basketball belly, like the whole thing. I'm like, and she yelled, like yelling. In my day, we rose to the occasion and we got our work done.
Okay, my blood is fucking boiling right now.
That's coming from, you mentioned it earlier, right? Like, women can be just as bad, right? And so she was about to set the trial for when I would be 3 weeks postpartum, but I made a record, which for the lawyers, maybe there are no lawyers on this call, but I basically was making a formal accounting of what this judge was proposing, like spelling it out in black and white. So if anybody looked at the transcript, there could be no mistaking that, like, and the only other lawyer in my office was going to be in trial in another state at the date she was proposing. So basically, and I think she like realized in that moment, because I stayed and talk about, like, this was before I learned thought work, but I was really proud of myself looking back. I did it at that time. I kept my composure, and we ended up trying the case, I think like a week before I gave birth. So she gave us the date before, but it's like,
which is still, by the way, a Herculean task.
like
Let's not underestimate, because I also tried a case about 37 weeks pregnant, and it
the ankles are massive. You're like,
yeah,
it was not good, but I got it done. But it's one of those things that the only other lawyers in the room, there were probably like, I don't know, 10 or 15 other lawyers, and they were all men. And that my opposing counsel did not speak up or have my back. He did in the hallway afterwards, but he was too afraid of that judge. And when I reflect back on that, I think like, okay, go you, like, to myself for like having my own back. But also like more women have to be brave. It's not easy in whatever your circumstance, when you're being accused of not taking your job seriously for being a mom, and being like, no, that's not the case. Here's what I'm doing. Advocate for yourself, because being a mom is not a weakness. Having boundaries to be present for your children is not a weakness. In fact, that's what makes a fulfilling and rich life, to be able to be present for those glorious moments and being present for the mundane. I think some of my happiest times as a mom are not the like milestones, like the birthdays or the, whatever but the like laughing at the dinner table.
Yeah. Yes.
And let's be an example for everybody else in our community to say like, yes, you can too. Like if you do it, other people will see it and believe it's possible. Yeah. And be an example of what's possible. And I think that it's scary, but I think everybody listening, I think is going to be happier for doing it.
Hallelujah. Yes, absolutely. And I also, as I'm listening to you speak, I'm thinking for every woman, every mom listening to this, if they are parenting with a partner, and if that partner happens to be male, I would love for them to share this episode with them as a way of hearing, one, what the experience of working moms, right? Having a judge berate you, having my supervisor look at me and basically assume that my career was over and that I didn't care about my job anymore. Having to lie or be vague so that a court doesn't set a hearing, having to skip meetings that are set at times when we can't attend them, or skip meaningful milestones. I truly think that when we elevate moms, we also elevate dads. And that dads, because of the patriarchy, because of the inherent role that they play, they can be the good guys and step in and help set some of these standards as well.
So powerful. It is so powerful. I'm so grateful to my husband. He's taken on just naturally fatherhood in the most beautiful way. And he's a little bit older than me. And so with he's 13 years older than me. And so he's so sweet in that he's like, you're going to have more time on the back end, which I hope is not true. I hope he lives a long, long time. But he said, you're going to have more time on the back end. So I have to make the most of this time now. And he has been so present. Pre-COVID, I was doing all the drop-offs and pickups and making all of the lunches and being just primary parent. And COVID for him was a real wake-up call in a beautiful way of like, I love not traveling. Who's gone a lot before. I love being here for dinner. And so when we all emerged and got back to the busy life that it is with small children, he coaches teams, he does pickups, he volunteers at school. Up until this school year, I haven't done any of the volunteering at school. He did all of the volunteer hours and stepped up last year to be a room dad. They called him the room dad for one of our kids' classes. It's funny, is they call it room parent for when all the moms do it, because we're trying to be, yep. but everybody called him room dad. Because
room dad.
He and another dad stepped up. They were the room dads. But it's so interesting to watch other men get involved too, because they see an example. And I don't think it's maybe even conscious. I don't think it's discussed. I, you know, I would never learn if it was discussed, because those are conversations between him and his contemporaries and his friends. But I have noticed in just like the last 2 years that so many more dads of our children's friends are showing up, to the baseball practice in their like slacks and button down, coming straight from the office, getting dirty. Who cares? You know what? The kids
Yes.
only be small once. Let's go play baseball, And
Yes.
there's been this beautiful growth of this community of dads in our world that, I mean, I think the more people that love your kids, the better. And
Yep.
so there's this community of parents that we've been so fortunate to foster, moms and dads. But how powerful is that for all of the families coming into our schools, seeing, my husband and this group of dads who are showing up to volunteer at school events or be the room dads, who are coaching this or showing up to that. It takes sacrifice from work, and it takes boundaries, right? Like, I would venture a guess that most of these men, like most of us working women, pre-kids, I was usually the last person in the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, if you had to travel for work, when you only have a partner, it's okay. You got to travel. I got to travel. No big deal. But to actually have the intention and to set the boundaries to show up for your kids' stuff, I think it's really, really cool and I think our generation of dads is really doing a wonderful job with this.
I do too.
What a gift it is to like the next generation of men who are coming up in all of the professions, where they're seeing, the dads in their 40s or 50s, really prioritizing family.
Yeah. Well, and that is such a richer experience for those men too, right? Then they get to also have the joy of going to the Little League game, or, finger painting, or whatever it might be. Megan, I'm like sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't surprise me about us. We could talk for another 3 hours.
I know, I probably have gone longer than you have for your episode.
No, I love that we are diving into this, because these are big topics, and they're things that, whether you're a lawyer or not a lawyer, or a working parent or not a working parent, like, these are the conversations that are shaping the world that our kids are growing up in. And, there's so many different ways that happens. And this is one of them. And this is where culture change starts to happen, right? To make it okay. If for somebody listening who's like, well, I don't work out of the home, right? You might not, but your child might, right? Your daughter might. And so just being aware of these issues that are impacting us, even if you're not a working parent, saying to your husband, what can you do in leadership where you work to make it easier for other working parents and for moms who are, in that space? Like, and my husband and I have these conversations. Like you, I run my own business, so there's more flexibility. And so sometimes I look at making an impact through him. And we need to sort of start normalizing those things, and owning with pride and joy and mindfulness the fact that we are parents first and X, Y, or Z second.
Well, and that just to like, for the parent who is home versus the parent who's in the workplace, doing your own internal work to figure out what matters the most to you. I call it core values work, right? For me, it's joy, family, and service. Those are the things that, if I am in alignment with those values, I feel fulfilled. I feel like this is the life, right? Mm-hmm. And so figuring that for myself, and then having a conversation with my partner, and then we make decisions together. And so part of that is the decision to have one parent stay home and one parent work outside the home. Sometimes that's the decision of, we're going to live in this high cost of living area because of opportunities, so we're both going to work outside the home. But how are we going to wrangle the kids and manage the schedules and all the things? And when you figure out what matters, cut everything else.
Yeah.
So while it may look like on paper, I'm doing all of the things, I'm saying no to a lot. And I'm not doing a lot of traditional mom or traditional female things, right? I don't do the grocery shopping. I don't do cleaning. I miss things at kids' schools because of my job. I'm an Amazon Prime mom. I'm not a Pinterest mom, right? Up until this year, when I had the flexibility of working for myself, I didn't volunteer in the kids' schools. I wasn't doing the drop-offs and pickups, to the point that it was like the spring of a school year, and I had to go pick up one of my kids from preschool, and I didn't know where his classroom was. That's kind of hard to admit on a public podcast. I did not know where his classroom was. And that's I had delegated so much, and my husband had taken on so much, because his core value was time and having time, quality time, that he knew. He had been in that classroom dozens of times, if not more. He had done all the drop-offs and pickups at the classroom door. And so it's okay to make choices that don't make sense to other people if they make sense to you.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have to give permission and say, because I know you well enough, Megan, to know you're a phenomenal parent. Like, your kids are connected. They know you. The fact that you didn't know where his classroom is, I know that is hard as a parent to acknowledge. And okay, good for you, because I would be willing to bet that as your children grow up, they will never be like, my mom didn't even know where my classroom was.
Well,
right?
I played it off. He didn't know. He didn't know.
He didn't know. But what he did know is that you were showing up at night and on the weekends and in the mornings and for the other, for other events. So you weren't doing pickup. Okay, your husband did pick up, but you did all the other things. And so I love that you said it doesn't have to make sense to other people if it makes sense and works for you.
And that gives you the chance to enjoy, like we were talking about how fast it goes. And I'm really enjoying, we call it the bigs and the babies, right? A 5 and 7 year old are in a different phase of life than my infant and my 2-year-old. And if you cut the stuff that's for other people or expectations that you think the shoulds that you put all over yourself, and you get to enjoy these little people, or these, elementary age, or these teens before they launch their lives, because you're doing what counts, even if you don't know where their classroom is in the spring.
Yeah. Even if you don't do it the way the mom next to you does it.
Because it works for her, it might not work for you.
Yeah. Megan, I just want to say thank you for this conversation. Like, there have been several times throughout this, I'm like, oh God, I can't ask my next question because I'm tearing up. Thank you for giving moms the permission to be all the things that they want to be, and to making those steps in your field, in our field, so that moms in other fields feel like they can start to take some of those steps too, and that they can figure out with boundaries and values what works for them and what works in their family. I think it is these little moments, like these little tremors, that make a big earthquake, right? And start to shift. So thank you. And thank you for the conversation. Like I said, I'd love to keep talking for hours, but in the interest of time, we will leave it there.
Thank you, Christy. And thank you for creating this podcast and the coaching work that you do, and the messages that you put out to the world. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm just so grateful that you thought to include me here. I appreciate your kind words and the chance to share a little bit of my journey.
I'm so thrilled. Thank you.
All right, everyone. I know that was a bit of a longer interview than you often hear from me, but I hope you found value in it. I find Megan to be such a warm, empathetic, understanding, like lovely human. And it's really been my pleasure over the last 4 years to, sort of be alongside her on her journey, and not in the sense that like I've been there or a part of it, I mean, we've just followed each other's careers and supported one another's careers. We met through an online Facebook group for lawyers, and that has been such a gift to me. I hope it felt like a gift to you as well. I will put Megan's full bio in the show notes in case you are interested in the legal side of her expertise. But I really hope what you walk away from today is a renewed sense of what might be possible in reframing our own thinking, in bringing mindfulness to our days and heartfulness to all the pieces of our lives. And on that note, I will leave it there. I will wish you a heartful week, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers.